Hey, I'm JJ Virgin, PhD dropout, sorry mom, turned 4-time New York Times bestselling author. Yes, I'm a certified nutrition specialist, fitness Hall of Famer, and I speak at health conferences and trainings around the globe, but I'm driven by my insatiable curiosity and love of science to keep asking questions, digging for answers, and sharing the information I uncover with as many people as I can. And that's why I created the Ask the Health Expert podcast, to synthesize and simplify the science of health into actionable strategies to help you thrive. In each episode, we'll talk about what's working in the world of wellness, from personalized nutrition and healing your metabolism to healthy aging and prescriptive fitness. Join me on the journey to better health so you can love how you look and feel right now and have the energy to play full out at 100. So I get this book in the mail from my buddy, Dr. Will Lee. Eat to beat your diet, burn fat, heal your metabolism, and live longer. Oh my gosh. So I immediately pinged him and said, you must come back on the podcast. So he came on before, and I'll link to it in the show notes, and with his Eat to Beat Disease, New York Times bestseller, the new science of how your body can heal itself. And he said, I was really not wanting to do anything around diet, but so many people reached out to me after the fact saying, as I was eating the way that you talked about in Eat to Beat Disease, I was losing weight. So we started digging into the research. And it's really interesting, when you look at this, because he came from a background, let me tell you a little bit about it. The background he came from gives him such a different way of looking at food. So he has developed more than 30 medical treatments and that impact over 70 diseases, including cancer, diabetes, blindness, heart disease, and obesity. He has a TED Talk, Can We Eat to Starve Cancer?, that has had over 11 million views. He's the president and medical director of the Angiogenesis Foundation. And he approached looking at food the way he created drugs. Like, what is the mechanism of action? How can this work? So imagine looking at food going, all right, how can this food help heal your metabolism? How can this food help you burn fat? And by the way, in this interview, yes, you are going to hear about foods that will help you burn fat and how it happens, how it works. Super exciting. So this is the book that I have been waiting for. I'm excited to share it with you. We go through a lot of really interesting stuff in this interview on which foods you should choose, how we damage our metabolism, etc., and how he came to this Mediterrasian diet. And he's also giving you a great meal plan too, his Mediterrasian meal plan, which you're going to be able to get at jjvirgin.com/beat diet. I know that's a little weird, but that was the easiest place to put it. So be sure to grab that and enjoy the interview. I will be right back with Dr. Will Lee. Dr. Will Lee, you're back, and you're back with the book I'm more excited than ever about, Eat to Beat Your Diet. Oh my gosh. Yay.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. And I know we always have great conversations about really the topic about health. And I'm a newbie, I would say, talking about, diet and weight. But I wanted to come at this really from a unique perspective, which is really, what is the new science of the metabolism telling us about how we can actually control body fat?
Yeah, and I'll give you something because it will make it all tie it together with a bow. If you think about it, that, okay, so what now? We 43% of the population is obese and 70% overweight or obese. And now it's something like only 6% have, no metabolic risk factors. I believe that we have to get metabolically healthy to lose weight. That we have it wrong. We think we have to lose weight to get healthy, and it's the opposite. And so really all of the work that you do, and I'd love you to start first with going back to Eat to Beat Disease, just how you look at food so differently, because now you're going to be able to apply it to this topic, especially in a time when everyone's going for the, semaglutide and all these drugs, right?
Right.
We need you. So tell the audience, and I'm going to also put in the show notes the interview we did about Eat to Beat Disease, which is another book you definitely want to have in your success library. But how did you come to start really studying food, and how do you look at this so differently than like the average nutritionist out there?
Yeah. Well, listen, I started out life being very interested in food because my family, my mom cooked great food. I grew up in the part of the world in Western Pennsylvania where there were lots of ethnic communities that really had pride over their food traditions. And so I was exposed to a lot of different things, more than white food when I was a kid. And I never forgot that. And in fact, I became more curious about that when I was in college because I began to study history, and the history of humans, of society, is intertwined with the history of food. So when I finished college, I did a gap year. And in my gap year, I actually went to Italy, and I lived in Italy and Greece specifically to try to learn more about how food and culture and health all kind of bound itself together to create the kind of the zeitgeist of just living in the Mediterranean. This is long before people were talking about the Mediterranean diet, sort of on a broad level. When I went to medical school, I learned drugs and bugs and surgery and chemo and all the stuff that we had to memorize, and I did it. But one of the things that I realized is that there's two things that were gigantic deficits in medical school. Number one, we learned a lot about disease, but we never learned about health. Number two, we learned how to treat disease, but we never learned how to prevent disease. And actually, there's a third deficit. And that third deficit is that, there's no doubt that medicines can be life-saving. People used to live only to 40 years old 100 years ago because we didn't have any medical technology. But yet, one thing that we lost somewhere in the last 100 years in healthcare is this 1,000-year tradition where food was, of course, a tool in the toolbox for health and healing. And somewhere in my education as a doctor, like that just poof, disappeared. And so I was involved with and excited by and still involved with developing new treatments, new biotech treatments for cancer and blindness and complications of diabetes. And, I happen to be pretty productive on it. Like we've had 43 new FDA approved drugs. So to me, I've had this long view that, man, we are missing this opportunity. We're missing the opportunity to prevent disease. Number one, we're also missing the opportunity to use food while we're undergoing treatment, and we're also missing the opportunities for use food for healing, which is like people just kind of assume people are going to get better by themselves, right? Well, it's not that simple, and we can use food to elevate that. So my first book was really about how the body protects itself and its health, and how we can use food to strengthen our body's health defenses. And one of the things that led to my current book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, was something surprising. I got thousands of emails and letters and feedback from people, and I would survey my community, my readers, to find out what they learned and how they were doing. And I was really surprised. People were saying, I feel more empowered. I feel stronger. I feel healthier. I've come off my medications, things that I knew was going to happen. But the surprise for me was some people were telling me that in addition, they were starting to lose weight that they couldn't lose before. And I heard this over and over again. And the first time I just kind of blew it off. But when I got, by the 20th one, I'm like, wait a minute, how can you be eating more food and losing more weight? Like that's counterintuitive. You eat more food, you should be gaining more weight. That was, in fact, by the way, one of the concerns I actually had when I wrote my first book is, I'm telling people to enjoy their food and eat, like, how can you be losing weight? So that actually dovetailed with my own research to say, what is actually happening? What's the science, the new science of the metabolism? And is there some surprises? Are there things that are myths or legends or urban legends that the new science is helping us have overturn and have a better idea what the truth is? And that's what this book is all about.
So I was working with a client probably 20 years ago who couldn't lose weight. And she came to me and she said, my doctor told me that I just needed to count my calories, and it didn't matter if I was eating Snickers bars, Pop-Tarts, as long as I just counted my calories, right? And so I have a feeling one of your urban legends the big misconceptions, hopefully, is going to be that, all calories are not created equal. Because, it's like just logically, that couldn't possibly be true. And you just said people were eating more. And I'm guessing there's something very different between the salmon broccoli dish and the ultra processed foods that are, hunger drivers.
Right, right. Well, no, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in what you were just setting up. For me, let me just tell you that I have now found myself having these conversations with all kinds of people about metabolism. It's a subject that most people think that they know something about. Because I'm a scientist, I approach subjects like, what do I know? But what's really interesting to me is, what do I not know? That's what scientists really spend most of their time thinking, like, what are the unanswered questions? And the more I dug into this, the more I realized that, metabolism is a still pretty new field. And counting calories, that's very, very old school. It's almost a t-shirt slogan, a licensed bumper sticker, and it almost means nothing, except that we do know that, empty calories are, I honestly, I didn't even really understand where did that whole concept, how do you even come up with the term? We'll coin the term an empty calorie. So I had to reconceptualize my own understanding as a doctor about metabolism, which I thought I knew a lot about from medical school. But here's how I've sort of come to see it, and it sets up for my book, which is that, that the human body is like an automobile. It's got an engine. The engine needs fuel to be able to run. And in a car, you've got your engine running and you've got a fuel gauge. And when your fuel gauge gets towards empty, it shows you, the driver, you got to pull over to the filling station, you pull out the pump and you stick it in a nozzle and you push the button, the nozzle, and you fill up the tank. And, when the tank is full, it clicks and you stop, and then you kind of go on your way. Right. Well, in the body, it's kind of similar. Our body runs like an engine and it needs fuel just like the car. And our fuel actually comes from food. The food that we eat, the energy comes from our food. We happen to call that energy calories, okay? But the quality of your fuel makes all the difference in the world in terms of what that fuel is able to do for you. Much more than just run your engine. It actually helps to really set up the entire success of your entire vehicle, and that's your entire body. Head to toe, every single function is wonderful. Now, unlike a gas station pump, where when your tank is full, the nozzle will click and now it'll stop filling up. Unfortunately, when it comes to food, our bodies don't have that clicker, right? I mean, we wish we sometimes had that clicker. And by the way, everyone that has that clicker, everyone senses that clicker when it's too late, right?
Right.
So what happens is, when you don't have that clicker, you just keep eating. And at some point, like you realize, like, oh man, like I just ate too much. Classic situation. Thanksgiving meal or one of these holiday meals, and you're like eating and talking, and you're going back for seconds or thirds, and before you know it, like you just had one more bite, and you just know you crossed that line. Like you don't feel good anymore. And so that's basically like there's no clicker at the gas station. The fuel comes out of the tank, down the side of the car, around the tires, pulls around your feet, and you are now standing in this toxic, flammable, dangerous mix, right? With having too much fuel. Now in your body, what happens is that extra fuel that we can stuff into our body has to be loaded safely into body fat. Our fat is actually fuel tank, and it stores the fat. So a small fat cell gets bigger and bigger. The more fuel you put it into it, the bigger the tank has to stretch to accommodate that. And so, this is really the beginnings of metabolism. Our calories, the energy from the food we eat, is fuel. But if you overload your tanks are going to get big. And the bigger they get, the more deranged the entire ecosystem of your fuel tanks are, and that sets off inflammation. And then that's it. Like once you actually start knocking down that domino, one after another starts following, the dominoes start following, and then your entire system, your metabolism, your biochemistry is derailed. And that's what leads to these chronic diseases.
Yeah. And I love the way you explained it, because, it's like you start out with a healthy metabolism, and gosh, if we could like ask, however we got here, our creator, like, why didn't you do a good appetite switch? Yeah. Why did you mess that thing up and the thirst switch? We could have gotten a lot better. Like these could have solved a lot of problems, maybe 10,000 years ago, we were supposed to gorge so we could survive famines. I don't know, but it certainly could have made it a lot easier. But you just talked about really how you damage your metabolism and kind of this bad snowball effect that then you have to crawl out of in order to be able to lose weight. Because in your book, you talk about, okay, you have to heal your metabolism, right?
Right.
So,
right. Well, so to heal a metabolism, a great starting point is to really understand what the new science teaches us about human metabolism. So most people think, I got the metabolism thing down. I'm a biohacker. I kind of got it down. Actually, amazingly, just 24 months ago, there was a brand new study published that completely upended everything we know about human metabolism. It was done by a guy named Herman Ponzer and a group of 90 other researchers. And they published this in the prestigious journal Science, which is one of the top scientific journals. And it's the first major published research study on human metabolism to give us a full understanding of what human metabolism is over our entire lifespan. Here's what they did. They studied 6,000 people from 20 countries that ranged from 2 days old to 92 years old. Okay. And they studied them all in the exact same way. They studied their metabolism. Here's what they did. They actually gave them a drink of water, H2O. Okay, H is hydrogen, O is oxygen, except their hydrogen and oxygen, their water had a little label onto the hydrogen and the oxygen. So you can measure their metabolism through their breath, through their urine, and in their blood. And when they measured 6,000 people from 2 days old to 92 years old and measure metabolism as, from these labeled drink of water, what do you think they found? They found the metabolism all over the map, okay? Just like you'd think, right? However, this is the age of artificial intelligence and high-power computing. So what this group did that was absolutely ingenious, that we've never done before, is develop an algorithm to look at every individual who participated in the study and develop in the algorithm a way to correct what their metabolism should be if they didn't have excess body fat. Let me repeat that. They were able to put into an algorithm a correction factor. So if you removed excess body fat, what would the metabolism look like? So when they did that in this gigantic chaotic sea of data, the conclusion is like, oh my God, no wonder people are all over the place. Turns out once you remove the effect of excess body fat, all humans only go through 4 phases of metabolism in their entire life. All right. Phase 1 is when you're born, you're synced up with your mom like a menstrual cycle. And then in the first year of life, your metabolism skyrockets much higher than in adults. Phase 2, from 1 year old, 12 months old, all the way to 20 years old, your metabolism is going down, 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 down. This is teenage years. This is when the kids are eating 2 dinners and they're bouncing off the walls and they're sprouting up like a beanstalk. And you're like, yeah, that guy's metabolism is clearly getting bigger or shooting up. Not the case. Now we see that it's actually going down, 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 down. Now, that's the second phase. Third phase is from age 20 to age 60. Our hardwired metabolism is designed without fat to be rock stable from 20 years old, 30, 40, 50, 60. It's rock stable. All right. That's how we're wired. And what that means is incredibly 60 can be the new 20. If you allow your metabolism to actually be that way. And after 60, your fourth phase, there's a little decrease. So by the time you're 90, your metabolism declines about 17%. You add the fat back in there and you start to crush your metabolism. So that's what's interesting.
So a couple things there. Of course, you don't know this, I'm turning 60 in like 2 months. And my belief is we can offset all of this with the right type of exercise, with, maintaining muscle. So that is what I'm focused on. But when they were looking at this and normalizing for normal body fat, because here's what I'm seeing with all the body fat measurements. When I was in doctoral school, what they taught us for the norms of body fat and what the norms are now are totally different. What happened? It's like we're starting to accept that people could have like 10% higher body fat and it's supposedly healthy. So what did they consider to be healthy norms for body fat?
Well, one of the things that you have to take into account is not just the subcutaneous fat, which is the stuff you can see in the mirror. It's the visceral
Yeah.
adipose tissue, the gut fat. Visceral means gut. So it's like the baseball glove of fat that's choking your organs
Were
inside
they
even skinny
discerning?
bodies.
Were they doing
Yeah,
both?
so they were able to actually incorporate
Wow.
that, which is part of the algorithm, right? You need to be able to calculate how much, because look, somebody who's got a big body, and this is a point that I make in my book, is that body size is an assumption that has misled us often.
Amen.
Right?
Makes me nuts. Yep.
So think about it. If you look at the fittest people on the planet every 4 years, it's the Olympians. And you got the tiny little gymnasts, and you've got the gigantic shot putters, and you've got the tall, skinny javelin throwers. They're all in great shape, but they've got different body sizes, and the amount of body fat and lean muscle mass and, their metabolism, their inner metabolism, and how that's affected. It's different. Everyone, when we talk about personalized nutrition, think about that. Like, you can be really fit and have a different body size. And then I also talk about another great sport to think about, which is boxing. There's 14 weight classes, for everything from like ultra featherweight to heavyweight, and everybody's got a different body size. And yet there is a world champion in every category. And so I think that this idea that, we should all be the same shape, and we should all aim towards this ideal is it's a misleading idea. And what we need to do is really try to personalize it to ourselves.
So in that study, were they doing a DEXA to figure everything out?
Yeah, so I think they use calculations adapted from DEXA of all kinds of people. Like, we've now actually characterized, and this is something that I thought was fascinating. When does fat, what is the natural history of fat? When does fat first form, right? Like in the womb, actually, fat forms in the womb. First, your blood vessels form, then your nerves form, and the third tissue that forms is body fat. Now, you had body fat before you even had a face you could stuff with food while you were in the womb. All right. And that's something that, like, and by the way, when you're born as a baby, right, healthy babies, cute, lovable, adorable babies are chubby. They got the double chin. They've got, the fat arms and legs that look like, circus balloons that you twist. All right. And the thing is that if you saw a lean, chiseled baby, like it looked like a fashion model with skinny legs.
Oh, that'd be weird.
That'd be a weird, sick baby. Like, you'd be really concerned, right? So body fat actually has a very important physiological, healthy role. Where fat goes wrong for us is actually when we have too much of it. And so really it's about taming fat and extra body fat in balance with your body size, and in concert with lean muscle mass, of course, especially as we get older.
I love that you're bringing up this body size thing, because it is unbelievable to me, Will, that we still go to the doctor's office and get on a scale. Like, we stopped looking at total cholesterol as some kind of a marker and started looking at all of the different particle size and number and all, but yet we still get on a scale instead of looking at skeletal muscle, looking at body fat, looking at fat. Like, it's just bizarre. It has to change.
Yeah. Well, and by the way, the crazy thing is that when you go to your doctor and you get your blood drawn, there's only like a dozen markers that are reported as healthy or unhealthy. And think about how much more information we have. I have been exploring different biomarkers of metabolism. How can you tell if you're burning fat or you're burning mostly carbs? Like, I'm exploring all these things because it's high time that we start to use the technology that's available to be able to get that information, the numerical information, and know how we're actually doing on a day-to-day level. Some people want to know minute to minute. I'm good with day to day. And that can be really powerful in guiding our decisions if you know if you're incented to actually do better.
So what are you looking at using? Are you using things like a lumen, or what are you looking at to be able to?
Yeah, so I'm just starting to play with the lumen right now. And I think that, for those of you who don't know this, I mean, lumen is a breathalyzer. Instead of having a state trooper give it to you on the side of the road, you can do it yourself in the morning or in the evening. And what it actually does is it measures, it's a carbon dioxide flow meter. And it's not just the carbon dioxide, the carbon of the carbon dioxide, but it's also the flow, the rapidity that you're blowing out. And it's able to calculate all this stuff. It goes into your phone in a cloud, and it gives you back a number. It's very convenient. And again, I'm just starting to play with it right now. But it's actually a fascinating guide that shows you that if you allow your body to do its thing over the course of an evening, when you're not eating, some people call that fasting. And when you're not eating, some people call that intermittent fasting. There's a lot of verbiage that kind of gets labels that get tagged to things that are natural.
Yeah, like you shouldn't be eating at night. You should be sleeping. Don't eat. It's not fasting. Right. It's
sleeping. It's sleeping.
It's intermittent fasting's gotten. So I heard a podcast the other day, and it was like, okay, you stop eating 3 hours before bed. You wait a little bit when you wake up in the morning. That's normal. That's not intermittent fasting.
Right. Well, and to flip that around is I tell people who ask me about intermittent fasting, I say, you know what? Think about what that term means. If you're intermittently fasting, which means you're not eating, then you're intermittently eating too.
Yeah.
So it's really which side of the equation you want to look at. And we're always intermittently eating or fasting. The key is actually, how do we give our body the greatest advantage to do what it's designed to do? And that actually then plays into the choices that we make, and not only what we eat, but how we eat as well.
So what were some of the things that you discovered, like as you were going through this, in terms of what things could help with our metabolism and healing our metabolism, what things can help with weight loss, or we could actually halt it?
Right. Well, so look, let me kind of come at this and explain it in a way that, coming from a guy who's been involved with developing cancer treatments. Okay. And, so you have to have mechanisms, you have to understand how it works. You need to understand dose. How much do you give over what period of time? And you have to be able to have some kind of measurement to know if you're actually making progress or not, right? I mean, that's true for heart disease or anything else in medicine. So that's how I come at this, because that's my background. And one of the things that I realize is, by understanding our basic metabolism, when we eat food, our insulin goes up, so that the insulin is the hormone that actually helps our body draw energy into the cell. So, the fuel tank, you put the fuel in the tank. Now that fuel needs to be put to use, and that's what insulin does. And what's interesting about insulin, people talk about insulin spikes, it's real, it's important. But when the key that I want to emphasize, when insulin is up, your body's hardwired. So the insulin's up means that you're absorbing fuel. So you can't burn fuel. You're trying to store it. And then when you're not eating, like when you're sleeping, okay, your insulin is down, and it actually turns upside down, reverses the switch. Okay. And now your body can actually draw into the fuel and start to burn fuel, burn extra fuel. And that extra fuel you might have eaten during a day. It might have been from yesterday. It might have been from the holidays. Doesn't really matter. It gives you that opportunity to burn. And so first I thought, okay, when you're eating, you're fueling up. When you're not eating, you're actually able to burn. And that's kind of a basic principle. So don't eat too much. Don't eat too late, all that kind of stuff. All right. Don't eat too early. Give yourself more time. However, it gets much better than that. What I learned that was a surprise to me, that helped me make sense of why my readers from my first book were telling me they were losing weight while they were eating food, is that there are some foods that contain natural molecules called bioactives that actually, while you're eating them, will trigger processes in your cells that will actually allow you to burn energy, burn fat while you're eating. So there are foods that actually fight fat. To me, that was a big surprise, like a really, really interesting one. And so what I did in my book is do all the homework to figure out which foods that you would find in a grocery store or in a village market that you might encounter that has human evidence, that has been studied in people, to show that something you can measure, metabolism, and not just BMI, but like actual weight loss, waist circumference, metabolic syndrome parameters, high blood pressure, cholesterol count, all those things that matter. Okay. And of course, most people don't have access to a DEXA, but that would have been great to actually look at that. But I do mention some of the studies where that is there as well. But, I take people on a tour as if you are, this is in the middle of my book, as if you are sitting inside my grocery cart and I'm wheeling you through the grocery store, and just show you, talk with you, narrate what I'm actually seeing and what the evidence is in the produce section, in the seafood section, in the beverage section. And then one of the things that I thought was, long needed was, that old adage, shop the perimeter, stay out of the middle aisles. I decided that I would take people right into the middle aisles. And there's a chapter
Ooh.
I call Treasure Hunt. And in the treasure hunt, you want to look for the treasure. You want to look for the real gold while there's a lot of fool's gold around there. And so, yeah, don't get the crappy ultra processed foods and the snacks and the stuff that's going to destroy your metabolism and hurt your health defenses. But I wanted to show people, here's what you pick here. Here's what you pick here. Everything from, apple cider vinegar to capers to dried mushrooms to chili peppers, the list of dried prunes. I mean, the list was going on and on and on. And I thought, this is what people need to hear. It's a message of empowerment. You can go into the grocery store. You can go into almost every section of the grocery store. And if you were aware of what you should choose that is supported by human evidence that can help your metabolism, feel free to add it to your cart. That gives you power.
So give us a couple highlights of the tour.
All right. Okay. So what happens when you go to the grocery store? First thing you see are, you actually see produce, right? Now, one of my, there's all kinds of, there's so much produce that's good for you. Dietary fiber, it's got lots of bioactives and polyphenols, of course. But there are foods that actually have evidence that they can actually shrink waist size, waist circumference, and help you decrease body weight. And one of them that I was so delighted by and to write about it are pears. I love pears.
Pears?
Pears, yeah.
I can't believe, first of all, I hate pears. The only pears I like are those Japanese. When I lived in Japan, I got hooked on those Japanese pears. Those are the only ones I like. The Japanese pear apple.
The Fuji pears that taste like an apple.
They're called a nashi in Japan. I don't know. They're a Japanese pear apple.
They're round.
It's not an apple. It's a pear, but it's a pear apple.
Right. Well, so pears, like apples, so both of them can be looked at together. Both have a good amount of dietary fiber. Okay, and that dietary fiber helps your gut health, meaning that it actually feeds your gut microbiome. And because the gut microbiome controls your metabolism, helps your blood lipids, helps your insulin sensitivity, anything that feeds your gut actually is actually improving. But there's something more. In both pears and apples, you actually have something called chlorogenic acid. Okay, chlorogenic acid, which is, by the way, a lot of these natural chemicals that can help us are not found in a single food, which is why I always kind of shudder when somebody says, here's the superfood, the one superfood you need to eat. Like chlorogenic acid, by the way, is found in apples and pears. It's found in coffee. It's in a lot of different foods, right? I got a cup of coffee with me right now. And the thing is that chlorogenic acid actually prevents your fat from growing. It actually slows down the growth of fat. And then the other thing it does that's really interesting, and we didn't have a chance yet to talk too much about this, but it stimulates your brown fat. So brown fat is something, okay, so let's talk about the different kinds of fat. 3 main kinds of fat. Jiggly fat, subcutaneous fat, meaning under the skin, near the skin. You can see it in a mirror, under your arm, under your chin. It's the muffin top. It's on your thighs and your butt, all right? May not be the most attractive thing, but it's not the most dangerous thing. The most dangerous thing is actually that visceral fat, the VAT, as you call it, and that can be stuffed inside your body frame, whether you've got a big frame or a small frame. And always tell people like, well, are you talking about skinny fat? And I'm like, yeah, I am. But I want to tell you what skinny fat looks like. Imagine you went to the FedEx station and you're going to ship a long fluorescent light bulb, okay? And you don't want it to break. So you buy a thin box, and now you've got to actually cushion it. So you add peanuts to it. And you could just pour some light peanuts in, but let's say you really stuffed that thing full of peanuts. Now it's like bursting at the seams. You close it, you tape it shut. At an arm's length, it's still a skinny box, but it is like it's actually being crushed on the inside. That's what VAT, visceral adipose tissue, this visceral fat actually does. And it's highly inflammatory. It's very destructive. So those are the 2 main kind of fats that we battle with usually. But a lot of people don't realize this. There's a third kind of fat, and it's called brown fat. And it's called brown fat because it actually looks brown. It's packed with mitochondria. Mitochondria is, and people might have heard about this term, are the kind of like the fuel cells of our body. And in brown fat, the mitochondria are so dense and they contain little iron particles All right. They need iron. It's kind of like having a flint in your lighter and a striker. So they're brown, and that's why they're called brown fat. But brown fat actually is not jiggly. It's not lumpy bumpy. Brown fat is paper thin, wafer thin, and it's not close to the surface, so you can't see it. It's close to the bone. And where is it? It's around your neck. It's behind your breastbone. It's a little bit under your arms, like the girdle of like a girdle of a bra. A little bit in your back, a little bit in your belly, and it's hidden. It's silent, unless you're in really cold temperatures, in which it fires up in order to warm you up without shivering. Okay, it's another way of protecting the body. Or if you eat certain foods. What are some of those foods that light up brown fat? Well, foods that contain chlorogenic acid that we talk, but also chili peppers, not just the dried ones, but also, the poblano peppers, the serrano peppers, those Thai peppers that you see.
Tim eats so many of these peppers. I personally can't stand them. However, I cold plunge every day, but I was like going, I don't know. I think I could trade that cold plunge for those peppers.
Well, but the interesting thing is we eventually figured out how the chili mechanism works, which is that when the capsaicin in chili lights up, gives you the heat on your tongue. That's like a switch, like an on switch in your tongue. When that happens, your tongue sends a text message to your brain, and it tells your brain to release a hormone, and the hormone is norepinephrine. And you can actually feel this if you actually eat something spicy, take some sriracha sauce or take some chili flakes, and you nibble on it. You will feel your brain will start sending this you'll feel tingling going right down the side of your neck.
I feel it with wasabi when I do.
Yes.
I love wasabi. Like,
me too.
I love wasabi because I love that brain rush. I love it.
Yeah. That rush is the signal. You are feeling the wave, okay, that's going to activate your brown fat.
Wow.
And when that brown fat is turned on, that wave, I'm telling you, I have this demo in front of me because I'm
having sashimi tonight. That's it.
Well, when you have that brown fat turned on, it starts turning on the space heating properties of brown fat. And then you show this is like a torch, right? So it goes like this, boom. Once you get a flame going, and that flame, this is the brown fat, has to draw that fuel from someplace, and it draws it from other fat stores. So this is good fat that can burn down bad fat and burn extra energy while you're eating. That's like the really cool thing. And so what I show in my book, and I take people around the store, mushrooms will do this, onions will do this, scallions will do this, garlic will do this, broccoli will do this, bok choy, broccoli rabe. Like when you start going around the thing, it's kind of like if you're shopping to cook, a Mediterranean or an Asian meal, like it's the same ingredients that are actually used. And so that's really how I really began realizing that, these ingredients that are good for our metabolism have been core ingredients in the recipes from the Mediterranean and from Asia, two of the oldest, most delicious food traditions in the world, but also recognized, at least the traditional versions, as two of the healthiest cuisines in the world. And now we have an explanation. Good for the metabolism.
I got to share something I heard the other day because I love your take on it, because I was so perplexed as to how someone would have drawn this conclusion. Because as I'm hearing this, it's just such a shout out for traditional foods, right? And, and if you look at the diet industry of the last 50 years, it's like all these diet foods and low calorie butter buds and air pop popcorn and, snack well, like all this garbage. And I was listening to that 60 Minutes interview about semaglutide. Did you happen to hear that?
Yeah.
I was so upset about this. So I didn't even know about it. Someone DM'd me on Instagram, said, did you listen to it? So I found it. And to hear this doctor say that 50 to 85% of our obesity is genetic, when in the 1900s, 0.5% of the population was obese, and now it's 43%. So clearly we didn't have a massive gene shift in 123 years.
Right.
We had a massive food shift in the last 20.
Right.
So, I mean, everything you're saying just shows you just eat real food
in ways that have been time honored over generations, and I think that's the key thing, because if you were to go to a real authentic Italian restaurant or a real authentic Chinese or Japanese restaurant and have them cook some of the original dishes. I mean, they're delicious. And they're actually quite healthy. And I think that, by the way, I want to just comment on the semaglutide thing for a second. It's a drug. It's approved for obesity. It actually works. Okay. And which is why there's like a rush now for everyone to be on it. And I sort of, when I hear semaglutide, I kind of think of fentanyl, like, it's kind of like, wait a minute, that's not something you want to be rushing towards. This thing it's a real pharmaceutical and it has real side effects and it's costly and it shouldn't be used for everyone. So there are people for whom morbid obesity is indeed a life-threatening situation where
and thank God we have these things for them.
Thank God we have them. Right,
absolutely,
exactly.
No question.
Right? So let's acknowledge that first, then to say that how these drugs work is by blocking the appetite center in your brain so you don't enjoy food. So you don't feel hunger for food. You don't crave something delicious. Now, I don't know about you, but if I lost all interest in looking forward to something that is tasty, I'm not talking about volume. I'm talking about taste, the sensation, the sensuality of food. That'd be a big bummer for me. That'd be like a sense that you're missing, right? And that's what these drugs do. They work because you lose interest actually in food, and it's really completely contrary to what I believe how food should play a role in our lives in modern society, which is we should not fear our food. We should embrace our food. We should love to taste our food. We should savor our food, and we should use our food to help our health, not to take it down. And so it really is sort of, there are people who are real foodies who will be able to sit down at a restaurant. And, I always admire these people. Like, they just happen to know. I have friends like this who are just know exactly just what the right thing is to eat, what kind of things to put together. And when the order comes, it's like, wow, that's really a great combination. It's kind of like somebody who just has a natural fashion sense. Whatever they do in the closet, it always comes out looking great. And I think everyone should really aspire to become more in touch with this natural whole foods done in traditional ways that are going to allow us to, let's say, take a leap, move forward into the future by, in a way, leaping backwards over the era of processed foods and media and marketing and brainwashing, all those crazy artificial colors and preservatives and flavors, back to those, really it's our dowry, it's our inheritance that we've had from humans that came before us. That's what I think we should be focusing on.
And I just hear this, when I hear how that works, I wonder, did we have to create a drug to counteract the fact that we created foods that were hyper palatable and not satiating?
Right. Well, the other interesting thing that's remarkable about our metabolism is how interconnected everything is. There's a systems-based approach to helping to heal your metabolism from inside. So not only do you want to choose the right foods, but you also, and eat them at the right times, but you also sort of want to be able to savor your food and enjoy the flavor, right? So busy people, in a frenetic society, and I've been through this myself, you go there, you eat in order to live as opposed to live to eat. You wolf down something and you keep on going to your next thing, or you're eating on the move, right? Like, no wonder we overeat, because we put more fuel in our body than the fuel gauge can actually measure. But if you take the time to chill out and really sort of start to experience the food in ways to tell you if you really enjoy it or not, like, take your favorite food. You can shovel spoonfuls or forkfuls. Yeah, okay, you'll fill up your belly, but you would actually get the same and probably more enjoyment if you took your time to eat it. Which is why in a lot of traditional Mediterranean and Asian cultures, and that's why I call this Mediterrasian. It's sort of like the way that I actually eat along the traditions of all this is you sit with people, you talk about the food, you enjoy the food, and you take the time to get to know your food and savor your food. It's more satisfying. And it's not about just shoving stuff into your face and keeping on going. Like, it is a important part of your day. And so I don't think that, people should consider healthy eating avoiding food. Quite the opposite. I think we should actually bake it in to our life mindfully and really try to find ways to enjoy it. And that's really why I take people through the grocery store. So I hopefully showing them things that, they might not have thought about that actually could be really good for their health. And for unfamiliar ingredients, what I tell people is, you know what, we're so lucky. We live in sort of this Google world where you could take something you might not know what to do with. Capers, for example, is not something everyone knows what to do with. Type in capers in Google, recipe, and then click video. And then all of a sudden you'll see videos popping up of people that really love it, that really know what they're doing, showing you how to do it and describing it at the same time.
And also looking through your book and seeing some of these different ingredients, like, my husband hates capers and I love them. So whenever we're at a restaurant, if there's a dish with capers, I'm getting the dish, so you can start testing some of these things out at some of the different restaurants too, right?
Yeah.
That you'd never think of. Plus they'll be able to test them because you are giving everyone a meal plan. I'm going to say it correctly, your Mediterrasian meal plan. Give me an example of a dish or two in this.
Well, okay. So So I always get asked this question. I mean, I know that when we've been together at Mindshare, like I get frequently asked this question, Dr. Lee, you study food as medicine. Tell me, what is your diet and what do you eat? And I always tell people, first of all, I don't have a diet. I don't have a fixed plan that I have to robotically follow. I have an approach to eating. And my approach is really, and this is what I publish in my book. I just spelled it out. I eat Mediterrasian style because I'm Asian. I grew up with an Asian background. I love Asian food. And I also love Mediterranean food because I lived in the Mediterranean before, in Italy and Greece. And I like to cook both. And when I am trying to decide what to eat, whether it's at a restaurant or whether I'm shopping or planning a dinner party, I naturally gravitate towards the sensibilities from both cultures to figure out what I should choose from. And by the way, what I write about in my book is that the Mediterranean, go ahead and take a look at a map of the Mediterranean. It's not just Italy and Greece and Spain. It's like 27 different countries. And Asia is not just Chinese and Chinese food and Japanese food and Thai food and Vietnamese food. There are 40 some countries in Asia. And so we're really talking about a blockbuster, a number of different types of recipes and cuisines you can choose from. And I love them. I love to explore all of them. I'm really a believer in finding your new favorite foods by actually by trying different things that appeal to you. So something that would be typical for me from Mediterranean doesn't necessarily fuse the foods together. That's fusion cuisine. I like fusion cuisine, but as an example, like I wanted to cook a little gnocchi the other day, but I got these mini ones. And what did I do? I used some tomato paste, like I have here. I used a little extra virgin olive oil. I used some chopped up black olives. I used some capers. I just mix them all together. 2 seconds. These are classic Mediterranean ingredients. Put them in a pan, heated it up, and man, it was such a umami bomb. Like, it was so tasty. And like, the thing is to eat it slowly and mindfully. So that would be something like I ate for lunch. But another time that I've actually done something on the Asian side, but actually added some Mediterranean ingredients. I actually will sometimes stir fry bok choy, baby bok choy, with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, right? So they tell you, oh, well, the olive oil is in for high heat. Also a myth. Olive oil, actually, and canola oil, which is usually used for frying, they roughly have the same smoke point. You can actually use olive oil. I wanted to get a little bit of extra Mediterranean style flavor in this bok choy. Now, you don't want to use too much oil, but you want to use it lightly. And then you flavor it with garlic, for example. And there's all kinds of ways that you can kind of blend things together. And so, by the way, the other thing that I always tell people about Mediterrasian, although it is how I eat, and it's very authentically how I eat. I've eaten this way for like 30 years more. The reality is that it sounds new, but in fact, it's very old. In fact, it's so old, it's about 2,000 years old, because Asia and the Mediterranean 2,000 years ago was connected by the Silk Road, the greatest trading route in human history. This was a caravan road of different paths that camels walked around, that people traded silk and other things on the Silk Road between these lands, but they also traded recipes, they traded ingredients, and they traded actual food. And so in a way, again, back to this whole idea about just revering the past and respecting the past and thinking about, is there something we've learned from the past that we can actually bring forward again to make something valuable new again, is really this idea of blending ingredients and blending cultures. It's not necessarily fusing, but can we share in the course of a day a little of this from this country, a little bit that from that country, and make it up yourself too. Adapt to what you actually can have. And anyway, that's my basic approach to Mediterrasian food.
Cool. And everyone's going to get your meal plan too. So I'm going to put that, I'm not going to make people try to spell Mediterrasian. I can hardly say it. So I'm going to put it at jjvirgin.com/beat diet, because I think I already have a Dr. Will Lee in there. So jjvirgin.com/beat diet. And that is for eat to beat your diet, burn fat, heal your metabolism, and live longer. Like, who doesn't want all of those things? And it's just by changing what's at the end of your fork. I love it so much. Thank you so much for being with me and for writing this awesome book and for all the work that you do.
Thanks, JJ. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Be sure to join me next time for more tools, tips, and techniques you can incorporate into everyday life to ensure you look and feel great, and more importantly, that you're built to last. And check me out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and my website, jjvirgin.com. And make sure to follow my podcast so you don't miss a single episode at subscribetojj.com. See you next time.